And good morning, it is 8:07. Welcome to this Thursday edition of the Neal Larson Show. Julie is out for the day, spending some time, much needed time, with her family. So it's not just me. We have Senator Jim Risch joining us from the nation's capital this morning. And Senator, we always appreciate you carving some time out for us. How are you doing this morning?
I'm doing really well and glad to be here. I will try to fill Julie's shoes for you, but that's a big ask.
Yeah, it is a tough task, and none of us men are up to that task. But I appreciate you appreciate you trying. So, Senator, let's dive in right. Well, we've got a domestic issue and we've got a foreign issue. The SAVE Act here domestically, the president really wants this, and the country wants this implemented as well, at least the core idea of this. And tell us how it's going right now. I'm seeing a lot of kind of pessimistic headlines that this thing is actually going to pass, but I'd love your particular take.
Well, I guess, first of all, I'm committed to do whatever it takes to pass this bill. I mean, it is so common sense, like you say, at its core. All it does is require that only U.S. citizens vote in U.S. elections, and that when you show up, you got ID to prove who you are to vote. I mean, what could be more simple than that? It's the polling is incredibly high on this, not only amongst Republicans, but also amongst Democrats. Democrats, however, are locked against the bill. They will all vote against it. And then there's a handful of Republicans because of their arguments, and I'm not on their side on this, but they argue that their state operates in a certain way as far as elections are concerned, and believe that the states ought to have control of that, which is a good principle by and large. But here, look, we don't have a problem in Idaho. Our elections are rock solid. We know who supervises them, who puts them on, how they're audited, and we've never had a problem ever. And so for Idaho, it's not an issue. But you get places like Chicago or California or Georgia where fraud is rampant, and we, even though we live in Idaho and don't have a problem, we have the right to insist that elections in other parts of the country are legitimate. So, look, I'm all in to do whatever it takes to pass this, but we're just don't have all the votes that's necessary. The president is pressuring those, and he's been a little successful. You know, there's been some changes in recent days, so we're going to do what we can to pass it. But there's a lot of misinformation on it, too. They keep talking about using the filibuster to pass it. People don't understand the filibuster is not a procedure to pass something. It's a procedure to kill something, and it's a very simple procedure. You just talk and talk and talk like Mr. Smith goes to Washington until you can't anymore. But at the end of the day, you can't stop something from passing. One of the people, they had the folks go through the archives in the Senate. They've never found a situation where the filibuster has passed the bill, and of course it can't because it's a procedure to stop it.
Yeah.
But they've never even found an instance where somebody was able to kill a bill using the filibuster, except in the case of Mr. Smith Goes to Washington movies. So turns out it works really well in the movies, but not so well in real life.
So basically what you're saying is the threat of the filibuster is what is the functional thing here. Is that right?
Not really. I mean, there can be a threat of a filibuster, but look, if you want to talk, you can stand up and talk. In recent years, I've seen it used, I think, 3 times by Democrats who talked for 24 hours wanting to break the record that the previous one had set, primarily to get attention because they wanted to run for president. Nobody knew who they were. And so they stood up on the floor and they got a lot of media out of it, and people showed up and applauded when their time was over. It accomplished nothing. I mean, it was just an exercise.
Senator, you just said Cory Booker without saying Cory Booker.
Yeah, well, he was one of them. I mean, Cory Booker was one of them, but there were others too. And if you want to run for president, you get out there and just like you say, Cory Booker. probably before he did that, you'd never heard of Cory Booker before. But because he went out and talked for 24 hours plus, then people know who he is. So, but again, not only has it never worked to pass or kill a bill, it's never worked to get somebody like the president either. So
yeah, well, it's put the president kind of on opposite sides as John Thune. They're both Republicans. They both would like to see the SAVE Act pass, but the difference comes in the pathway and the ability for the votes to be there. And President Trump just yesterday said, well, Senator Thune needs to be more of a leader. He needs to step up and find a way to get the votes so that we can move forward with a standing filibuster. And I know you want to see it passed. You said we need to do anything or whatever we need to do to get it passed. And so I'm assuming you're for the standing filibuster if it gets us there. But what would you say about this sort of this little bit of daylight between the president and the majority leader?
Well, I think where the president's coming from is he looks at John Thune as the majority leader, and as the majority leader, you're expected to deliver the votes for your party. But there are occasions when it can't be done. Let me give you an example, okay? If they came to me, my party came to me and said, well, look, we got enough votes where we're going to be able to sell off public lands. So we need one more vote, and you're going to be it. I'd say, guys, you can put me on a barbecue spit and turn it. I am not voting to sell off public lands. I don't care what the party says. I don't care what anybody says. I'm just not going to vote that way. And you have strong feelings on this the same way. You can't force people to vote for something, but that's just the way it is. And I think the president's frustrated that John Thune can't persuade people to vote for it. The most persuasive person in town, obviously, is the president of the United States, and he has pursued it, and he has changed some votes, as you know. In fact, just quite recently. But you got to have enough votes to pass something. It's that simple.
So one last question, Senator, and I'm just kind of watching this back and forth going on. When Senator Thune says we don't have the votes, I'm assuming they're counting the votes in conversations behind closed doors. But if pushed to be public about it, where the SAVE Act, just the core idea of the SAVE Act, is so popular among every broad demographic in America, aren't they more likely to switch their vote, which, it's not public anymore? They have to be accountable to their voters. They've got to be. So what's said behind closed doors may be very different than what gets debated on the floor of the Senate.
True to an extent, but I think we're going to vote on it. I think Thune's going to put it up for a vote. I mean, what he wants to do is continue to put the pressure on until he's got enough votes to pass it. He's convinced that he doesn't have the votes to pass it, or we'd run it right now and pass it. So yeah. I'm sure that he continues to work it, and I know he and the president talk regularly on who needs to be talked to and that sort of thing. But there may be some pressure like that, but I think everybody knows where everybody is. I mean, I don't think it's a secret. The people who are voting no on it, that are Republicans, hate being in this squeeze, but feel they have to because of what their constituency at home feels like. But they're not. I don't think they're embarrassed about their position. They don't want to be in it, but I don't think they're embarrassed about it. So it's a process, and it isn't that Thune won't put it up for a vote. I'm sure he will eventually. Even if it fails, I think he'll put it up for a vote because, like you say, everybody's pressuring, saying, why won't he put it up for a vote? He can, and he will, I'm convinced, eventually.
All right, let's shift to Iran. Of course, about a week and a half ago, the strike, the Operation Epic Fury began in Iran, and so much has happened, Senator, since we spoke last and since that operation began. And the latest development that I'm seeing this morning is that at least the current Khomeini, Ayatollah running Iran, says the Strait of Hormuz is going to remain closed. And I'd love your overview on what's happening in that region right now.
We'll be back after a quick break.
Hey, it's Brad from Now 105.1 and QP99. I'm in the studio here. I love our studios, by the way. Ranger Rick back there. There's Neal and Julie doing their thing. Hey, when you want to advertise on the radio, what do? You call the radio station, right? But what do you do when you want to advertise on Facebook and Instagram and Hulu and Disney Plus and Peacock and the other TV streaming services? You can kind of click around on them and make guesses or read books or take courses online on how to do that advertising. Or you could call us at the radio station. At Sandhill Media, we take care of your local radio and digital marketing. So reach out to us at sandhillmediagroup.com and we'll make sure that your message gets heard and seen wherever your customers are.
Well, we commenced this operation, like you say, about a week and a half ago, and we're the United States of America. We have destroyed Iran, and do not believe what you're reading in the online or in the media. Their navy is sunk; it's gone. Their air force is destroyed; it's gone. The country is on its back. We have complete ability to fly anywhere we want in that country. They could, if they wanted to, turn out the lights. They could destroy all of their electric generating facilities and that sort of thing. But these people, the regime that is running the country, are stubborn. They have this radical religious view and are willing to die for it. And that's what happens when you're operating on a radical religious view like that. And the Iranian people, if they had the ability to take over that country, they would in a minute. And I believe that country would be a democracy, and it would be a robust democracy and a Western-leaning democracy. They were 47 years ago. Until the radical religious leaders took over the country, and since then you've got this terrorist organization essentially running the country. So there are two issues that need. Everybody says, when's this going to be over? Well, it's going to be over when Donald Trump says it's over, because he's in full control of this. But there are two issues that you need to focus on right now. Number one is the Strait of Hormuz, because it is the last weapon that Iran has. It's kind of like a nuclear weapon. I mean, they're using it now because that's all they have. But it is a powerful weapon in that it bumps up the price of gas in America, which turns Americans against whatever's causing that. We got to remember that the price of gas right now is significantly less than when Joe Biden was in office. We really focused on ratcheting that down immediately when Donald Trump took office. We were very successful at it, and we'll be again. This is a temporary thing. People don't like to hear that. It's not temporary when you're putting your credit card in the gas pump. It's right there, right now. But that is an issue. The Straits of Hormuz. They're focused on it, and they'll straighten that out. The second one is the ability of the Iranian people to take over the country. I wish I could be more optimistic on that, but these people are vicious. I mean, if they had all these protests earlier this year, and the country is at the weakest it's ever been because people took to the streets. However, they killed, nobody knows how many people. Estimates are as high as 50,000 people. When they have a protest, the IRGC, the Iranian Revolutionary Guard, they get on the roofs, and whoever is the leader of it, they just kill them. And that breaks up a protest pretty quickly. When people start just dropping on the streets from the snipers killing them from the roofs of the buildings. So they're tough. I mean, they are very, very tough. And you remember when the 12-day war was over, one of the things that really demonstrates who these people are, when that 12-day war was over, the first thing they did was go out in the streets and start gathering up people that they felt were in sympathy and executing them publicly. I mean, this is a brutal regime, and the people don't. If they had a First Amendment and the Second Amendment like we have, it would be free now. They don't have weapons, they don't have guns, and The IRGC is fully armed, and the religious zealots are. They don't care what they have to do. They have this vision, and they are inspired that what's going to happen is they are going to create a caliphate that covers the entire planet, and everyone will be Shia Muslim, not Sunni Muslim, but Shia Muslim that practices Sharia law. And they believe that they can get there, and that they're going to get help from above, and that's what's going to happen. And they're willing to die for it.
What you've laid out, because the Iranian Guard, they're still in place, even though we took out the top leadership, the future is still a very, very rough path for the people of Iran, because they will just continue to elevate people into the top levels of the Iranian regime. Is that what you're saying?
Clearly, the only thing that there's a couple things that give you hope. Number one, that country is not a small country. That's a country of 92 million people, and the demographics in that country are that 70% of that 92 million people are 35 years old or younger, and they don't want anything to do with this. You know, they want a very different life than what they've got. So, they at some point in time, you're hopeful that they will get critical mass to be able to overthrow, but they're going to need help from either the IRGC or the regular army. They have two different military organizations in the country. Both of them, of course, at this point are controlled by the radical the radical leaders there.
Yeah.
But but they don't get along too well either between the two of them. So you don't know what's going to happen internally, and hope springs eternal in that regard.
I know we're close on our time, Senator, but I would ask one last question here, strategically, logistically, whatever. We've decimated so much of their infrastructure. Why is it so hard for us to, at least temporarily, commandeer control of the Strait of Hormuz so the oil can continue to ship through that area?
Well, I can't talk about the strategies and the tactics they're going to use, but I can tell you that that thought is not far from everyone's mind. The Strait of Hormuz has to be opened. It will be opened.
Yeah.
How that happens, we'll leave that to the guys on the ground. They know how to do that.
Yeah. All right, U.S. Senator Jim Risch, we appreciate your time, Senator, and look forward to chatting with you again in a couple of weeks.
All right. Always good to talk to you.
All right. It's 8:24 now on News Talk 107.9. Quick break, and we'll continue on the Neal Larson Show on this Thursday. It's 8:27 on News Talk 107.9. Now, I know this comes as a shock, but prior to this, I was not a subject matter expert on the Strait of Hormuz. And another shocker, I'm still not a subject matter expert on the Strait of Hormuz. However, I've done a little bit of background on this. Of course, there's the Persian Gulf, and the Strait of Hormuz is just this little choke point, kind of between Oman and Saudi Arabia on the southern shore, and then Iran is the northern shore. And it's just a geographical anomaly that Iran has so much tactical and strategic advantage over that part of the world. At its narrowest, it's only about 21 to 34 miles wide. The shipping lanes are only a couple miles across. Iran controls the entire northern coastline. Oman controls the southern side. Because the waterway through the strait is so narrow, ships passing through are always close to Iranian territory, and that makes them vulnerable to Iranian military pressure. And to add to that, Iran holds several strategic islands inside or near the strait, including Abu Musa and the Tunbi Islands, T-U-N-B islands. These islands can host radar, missiles, naval forces, giving Iran vantage points over the shipping lanes. Now, it would not surprise me if we've destroyed some of that already, but I don't know for sure. but it lets Iran monitor and potentially threaten traffic moving through that passage. So you have these ships that would love to go through, keep the oil flowing, keep their business going, but the insurance companies that insure the ships can veto that. They can say, no, you can't go through that. It's too risky, and we're not going to insure your ship. So they don't want that to happen. And as has been stated many times, if you've been watching the news, about a fifth of the world's oil and gas goes through the strait every day. And the countries whose exports depend on it are not just Iran, but Saudi Arabia, Iraq, Kuwait, Qatar, the United Arab Emirates. And Iran gains leverage just because they're able to threaten disruption. That's the kind of people they are. Iran built a military strategy specifically for the strait. They don't rely on a big navy like we have, or Russia or China. They use asymmetric warfare, and it's designed for this narrow waterway. It's their trump card, no pun intended. It's the leverage that they have, and so they employ naval mines. They have fast attack boats. They have anti-ship missiles on the coast. They have drones and small submarines. And these weapons can be deployed quickly from nearby bases. And even a small number, doesn't have to be a lot, a number of mines or attacks can scare commercial shipping, and that effectively is what shuts down the traffic. And finally, legally, ships have the right of transit passage through the strait under international maritime law, but enforcing that right requires military protection. If Iran threatens ships or lays mines, commercial shipping companies may simply refuse to sail, giving Iran practical leverage even without formally closing the Strait of Hormuz. So that's where we're at that's the straight dope. See, I'm filled with dad jokes all the time. Do you know, for every dad joke I actually tell, I suppress probably 8 or 10. Just so you know, and I do that for all of you. I don't want you to groan all day long. It's 8:32 on News Talk 107.9. We'll break for the news. We'll come back. We'll open up the phone lines. And don't forget, coming up in the 9 o'clock hour, Idaho Democrat Party Chair Lauren Necochea will join us. We got a few questions to ask the chair of the Democrat Party. And, yes, I'm going to ask her about Tim Walz. And yes, I'll ask her about this year's legislative session. They've put up a lot of candidates that will appear on the ballot in November. So we'll ask her about that as well. Right here on News Talk 107.9.
Anyone that is only for Americans being registered to vote cannot be against the Save America Act.
I think the talking filibuster would actually improve comity in our chamber and require us to be present. That might pull some Democrats off the sidelines.
When I brought that first bill to outlaw sex changes on children in 2022, it passed the House, but it didn't get a hearing in the Senate. It was called the crazy bill.
I believe Tucker Carlson is the single most dangerous demagogue in this country. And I'll tell you, I've made the decision that I'm going to take him on directly.
All right, it's 8:38 now on News Talk 107.9. Neal Larson and no Julie Mason today. She's spending some time with her family. Her adult kids are in town and for a limited window. And she's like, how would you feel if I took Thursday off? And I said, you betcha. You go ahead and do that. Anyway, she lined me up with a whole bunch of interviews today. We had Senator Cook on at 7:30. You just heard the interview with Senator Risch earlier this hour. We have Lauren Necochea coming up next hour. But right now, we have a phone call. So let's go to the phones. Welcome to the program, caller. How are you?
Hi, this is Kurt. I've been listening about the voting bill.
Yeah.
And a couple things. I'm going to mention a book and a movie. And so some of your listeners, if they would like to get more information about voter fraud, they could jot down some titles. Years ago, I watched a movie called 2,000 Mules by Dinesh D'Souza. And it talked about ballot box stuffing and the fact that if the ballot box stuffing had not been done, Trump would have won in 2000. And a couple of weeks ago...
2020, you mean, but yeah, go ahead.
2020, I'm sorry.
Yeah,
I wrote notes here, and I wrote down 2020. Thanks for correcting that. A couple of weeks ago, I got a book, and I've read it cover to cover. It's called Stolen Elections, and then the subtitle is called The Takedown of Democracies Worldwide. The author, his name is Ralph, I'll spell his last name, Pezzullo, Pezzullo. And before I got the book, I knew there was some shenanigans going related to Venezuela and different electronic voting systems, which I won't name so I don't get sued. So this book talks about fraudulent voting software and hardware that was developed in Venezuela to support their dictatorial leadership there.
Yeah.
And the book is quite interesting. It talks about its use in several United States elections. But it's also been pushed into many other countries, Central and South America, for instance, to help elect Marxist leaders.
Yeah.
And one of the things that bothered me, I haven't done any checking, but it says that this same software is used in several states by different voting systems, and Idaho was mentioned.
Yeah.
So that was kind of interest to me, but so I'm not prepared to do a book review over the phone, but just to let people know that this book for me was very interesting. It gave all the details on how Venezuela was involved.
Yeah.
And so that's all I have.
Well, thank you. I appreciate you pointing our listeners to that, encourage them to check it out. But yeah, I remember that documentary from Dinesh D'Souza, 2000 Mules, and it was quite explosive. I remember when it came out, and there were watch parties that were going on. I remember going to one or two of these, and they would pack the room and fill the room. I do believe, and this goes back a few years now, so the memories are not vivid. But if I remember right, there were a couple of elements of that documentary that got discredited. Not all of it, not the bulk of it, not most of it, but just a couple of elements that were discredited. And therefore, the media went crazy and said essentially insinuated that the whole thing had been debunked. And I had noticed that 2000 Mules, I went and looked for it later because I thought, well, I want to rewatch it. I want to kind of match it up with what we have learned since then. It was hard to find a way to watch it. And there wasn't, the availability seemed to have been pulled, and I'm not quite sure why. Maybe it was the subject of litigation, and that was part of the litigation. Maybe there was defamation, maybe whatever. And they said, now you've got to pull the availability of the film so you don't, keep incriminating yourself with defamation. Anyway, I don't know why, but I do remember that film became kind of hard to find after it was widely available for a while. And I'm sure you could go out and find it in some corners. But I am seeing these headlines where I think Georgia is an example of one of the states and Arizona is another one, where they are, I don't know what the right word is, confiscating or going in, and so they're able to look at the actual ballots and do a forensic thing. There's still stuff happening in these different states. And I'll tell you, put all the pieces together, including the latest news that we have over the almost violent opposition that the Democrats have to shoring up our federal elections. Notice the almost violent sometimes it really is, but for the most part. But it is this very, very strong opposition to changing our immigration, deporting illegals, closing the border. The Democrats act like these things are existential threats to their viability moving forward. And do you know why? I think they are existential threats to their viability moving forward. I think the Democrat Party has, for a couple of decades now, been building this illusion of relevance, this illusion of viability, and they've been gaming the system. They've been overloading. You know, you look at the whole issue about sanctuary states. And of course, they dress it up in good motives, like, we just want to care for the poor. Our doors are open. You come here. We're going to take care of you. You can go to school. We're going to get you started with money. We're going to get you started. So all these things get promised. Plus, they're a sanctuary state. Nobody's going to be chasing you down from the state and during a Biden administration, then there's no federal agents going to be chasing you down either. You just come here. The reason they do that, they don't give a crap about being kind and being a good Christian and being compassionate. They've sold a lot of people on that. But actually what they're doing is they're playing a numbers game. And right now, under the current interpretation of our law in America, the census will count for apportionment purposes, even people living illegal. Anybody occupying a state will be counted for apportionment. So if you can load up your state with more people and attracting them with free crap, funded, of course, by the American taxpayer, both present and future generations, then you can load up the population of your state and you can start to win some congressional districts that are going to go to Democrats. They may not be able to vote. Now, I think that Democrats want illegals to vote, and I think that they have maneuvered a way to make it not enforceable. This brings us to the SAVE Act. They don't want an E-Verify for voting. E-Verify is for employment, largely. They don't want a similar system in place to make sure that if you're voting in an American national election, that you're a citizen. This is why they're opposing it. They're opposing it against the will of their constituents. 70, 80 plus percent of every demographic across America believes in the core aim of the SAVE Act, which is make sure if you're voting in a congressional or a presidential race that you are an American citizen. That's it. That's all. It's very simple. And it's straightforward. And it's not hard. I mean, I say it's not hard to implement. There's a lot to it, but they know how to do it and they can get it done. The political will is there from the voter standpoint. I think the political will is there among most of the Republican Party, but the Democrats are against it wildly. And the only reason they would be is because it will not allow them to game the system. So it's all baked in. It's all kind of baked in to what, and the core problem here, yes, it's fraud, all of that. But really the core problem for the Democrats, I say this 15 minutes before we interview the Democrat chair. So I say it with love and compassion and gentleness, but their ideas are terrible. What they put forward is largely unwanted by most of Americans. If they put it forward honestly. Sometimes they couch it in a way that snookers people, but overall, these ideas that they're putting forward, especially now that they're wading into kind of the deeper cultural issues like gender and like all of that. And I think those are the issues where the lines are very blurry between the secular and the spiritual. And so they're cutting into some very, very, very important elements and aspects of our existence as human beings. And they want to control it. And this is what our fight is. This is what we are about, is making sure that they stay out of our children's minds and body parts. And I'm trying to keep it family friendly here, but they are in territory that I think in many ways is uncharted, especially for America. And it truly is it's a battle for souls. And I look at it, this has been the tough part of this job. When I started in talk radio 30 years ago, it was pretty easy to divide the sort of secular, political, civic battles from the spiritual battles. And my show kind of kept I didn't want it to be Sunday school. Like I have a deep faith and I believe what I believe. But that's for a different context. This show has largely, for most of my tenure as a talk show host, has been about the fight between the American left and the American right. And how that affects the political system and also how it affects our day-to-day culture. But I'm telling you, as we have progressed toward 2026, it's getting much more difficult now to parse out and separate the temporal from the spiritual. What's happening is very, very charged spiritually, and they're wading into this territory. And so, that this discussion expanded beyond what I had anticipated based on that phone call. But this really is the battle for the human soul. That used to be firmly in the realm of faith, that you wanted to save the souls of human beings. I think that is increasingly the case in the political side. We got a break. Take a quick commercial break here. We'll come back. I'll share some texts that have come in, and we'll get all prepped here for Democrat Party Chair Lauren Necochea coming up in about 15 minutes. It's 8:55 now on News Talk 1079, Neal Larson and Julie Mason. And I want you to take a look at your windows. Do you see any condensation between the window panes? Maybe they're discolored. Maybe they're warping. You can see that rainbow effect when I mentioned the discoloration. Anyway, your windows might be breached. They might be leaking air. And maybe they just weren't that energy efficient in the first place. And you'd like to upgrade the efficiency, upgrade the quality, upgrade the aesthetics, and make it look beautiful with your home. That's where Advanced Window Products comes in. They're the top-rated replacement window company in the state because they build the windows, they install them, and they then guarantee them not for 5 years or 10 years. They guarantee them for life, and that even means knucklehead breakage. Neighbor kid throws a baseball through your window, it's covered. They have the highest quality and the most efficient vinyl replacement windows in Idaho. A lot of colors to choose from, and for a limited time, you can get big savings, thousands of dollars in savings when you order 10 windows or more. And I'm going to give you the phone number here, but I do want to tell you one big reason to call today and to call now is you want to get the process started if you are going to order windows, because they manufacture the windows and they are custom. They build them to within 1/8 of an inch tolerance for whatever space it needs to be in your home. Then it takes a little while, and they tell us when Scott and Todd visit, around 12 weeks. So you're looking at about a 3-month lead time. That's why you want to call today. Here's the number, 208-852-8685. That's 208-852-8685 for a low-pressure visit for them to come. Just look at the windows, see what your needs are. You can also go online to advancedwindows.com. And yes, they have financing available. And you can save now and pay later. And yes, still get the offer. Again, that's Advanced Window Products, 208-852-8685. All right. Well, that's it for the hour. I'll be back, though. Just got confirmation via my text that we will have Idaho's Democrat Party Chair, Lauren Necochea, joining us at about 9:06 right here on News Talk 107.9.
You and I have a rendezvous with destiny. We'll preserve for our children this, the last best hope of man on earth, or we'll sentence them to take the last step into 1,000 years of darkness. We will keep in mind and remember that you and I have the ability and the dignity and the right to make our own decisions and determine our own destiny.
This hour of the Neal Larson Show is brought to you by Crystal Water. The difference is clear with Crystal Water.
Your world, your country, your community, and you. Let's talk about it now on The Neal Larson Show with co-host Julie Mason.
And good morning. It is 9:07. I'm Neal Larson. Julie is out today spending some time with her family, but I'm here, and we're pleased to be joined by the chair of the Idaho Democrat Party, Lauren Necochea. Chair Necochea, welcome to the program. How are you this morning?
I'm great. Thanks, and good morning to you.
Well, we're excited to have you on, and I always appreciate We've had Alana Rubel on a number of times. We've had James Ruckty on. Of course, he's a Democrat from our side of the state. And even though we often disagree on a number of points, I always appreciate the conversations. And so I'm glad you've opened the door to us, and we've opened the door to you, and we can talk about what's happening in Idaho this morning. So we do welcome you to the program. And I guess I'll ask you right out of the gate, this has been a very unique legislative session. It's seen friction between Republicans and Democrats, but also Republicans and other Republicans. And I'd love your take on this. And as we get into these waning days of the legislative session, how do you feel that it's gone?
I have not seen this outside of, a big national recession where we're in dire straits with the budget, and that means a lot of disagreement and a lot of things to work through. Unfortunately, there's the Republican supermajority is not willing to kind of patch the hole in the budget that's leading to all kinds of cuts, from wildfire prevention and suppression to public safety to Medicaid mental health treatment therapies for kids with disabilities, and just because resources are so constrained, you are seeing, as you said, a unique session where, I will say every session that there's infighting among the Republican Party, but it's unique because the stakes are so high and there's just a lot at risk.
So, and I would agree that there certainly has been these points of difference that have gone on. But I do want to ask you, what is your solution? And you do speak for the Democrat Party. Do you think that Idahoans just we need to raise the tax rates again? Or I know many of the people in your party would like to dip into the rainy day fund that we have. So if you could craft the solution to this, what would it be?
So certainly the rainy day fund is exactly for these types of scenarios. And especially when we know we're going to, like with wildfires, the amount of money they're allocating for wildfires isn't going to get us through a week of the summer. And we all know that they're putting that on a credit card. So why not just tap the reserves and let's be honest about it. I think we absolutely need to do that. We need to look at the voucher bill. It's one thing to say we're going to go out there and replace private dollars that were being spent last year on private and religious schools, and we're going to put tax dollars towards that. If you have extra money, we don't have extra money, and they did that without raising any revenue. They said we're going to start this whole new thing and put your tax dollars are going to go to someone else's private school that they paid for last year, but we're not going to raise any revenue to do it. So that is one part of the patch. We also have a problem with our income tax rates. They knew they were doing too much last year, and that's why they adopted a revenue estimate that was higher than the Idaho State Tax Commission. Any sort of economic forecasting thought it would be. They kind of monkeyed with the numbers to make it look like all this money was going to come in, so they could do $250 million in income tax, really concentrated at the top of the income spectrum. And they've been doing this every year. One year when I was in the legislature for 5 years. One year they cut those top income rates twice. And just over the last 5 years, the accumulated impact of that is that if you're in the top 1%, your household is getting a benefit of $20,000 a year from just the past 5 years of tax cuts. If you're in the middle, you're getting $453 on average. And if you're at the bottom, you're getting $33 in that bottom 20% bracket. So it's really upside down compared to what I think working families need. In the midst of all of this, the Republicans also did away with our child tax credit, which just gave, working families an extra boost at that most expensive time in your life. You're trying to raise kids, here's a couple $100. And they canceled that. They got rid of it so that they could do these, big tax cuts for people at the top. And they went too far. And so we have to dial it back if we're going to, be able to fund firefighters, Idaho State Police. And again, Medicaid, the things are, that are on the chopping block in Medicaid are very popular for your listeners and my supporters across the board.
Yeah. So, by the way, we're talking with Lauren Necochea. She chairs the Democrat Party in Idaho. And I asked you to kind of lay this out. So I didn't want to interrupt you, but I do want to go back to what you said. And I feel the need to correct the verbiage that you used. It is not a voucher. It is a tax credit. And there's a very specific reason. Vouchers are crafted very differently than tax credits are. But we actually had the same exact conversation with Senator Ruchte when we interviewed him. Why is your side so hell-bent on characterizing a mere tax credit as a voucher? It seems dishonest.
Well, because it functions like a voucher, and that's what people understand. Tax credits function in all different kinds of ways and work differently, but people understand the word voucher because that's what it's a voucher by another mechanism.
Okay.
You get the cash back. If you want to call it a tax credit that reimburses your private school tuition, you can. I just think it's easier for people to understand.
By your definition, the launch program is a voucher.
It is a
voucher.
Sure. Scholarship.
Okay, how is it not a voucher?
Like potato.
That's exactly what Senator Ruchte said. So, okay, well, Chair Necochea, we can move on to another issue here. When you
one distinction with the launch program is that it creates new access to new things that people didn't have before. It creates access to welding programs after, in post-secondary education or going to a nursing program. You can call it your tax credit. I can call it a voucher. It's a voucher scheme. It's anyway, but that's all that is doing is replacing private dollars with taxpayer dollars.
Yeah. Okay. Well, we can move to another issue. I know this year, of course, is a legislative election, and all the legislative seats are up. And I've seen, because I follow what the Democrats are saying. You guys have a lot of candidates that are running this year. So I'd like you to maybe lay that out for us and tell us about, this year and this effort to get more candidates on the ballot for the Democrat Party.
This has been a big push the last couple of cycles. for decades, we left too many seats unchallenged, and that's not healthy. It's not healthy for any voter, left or right, if the person has no challenge, if the candidate has no challenge in the general election. And I would say what's happening is that as that's happened over the years, Republicans are only looking over their shoulder to the right, so they have to get more and more extreme to compete in their primary challenge. And we've seen a lot of outside money come in and try to get the most extreme conservative candidate through the Republican primary, and then that's not healthy. And then you have Republicans, and I saw it on the House floor, and people whispered it to me. It's like, oh, I know this bill is bad, but I have to vote for it, or they're going to attack me in the Republican primary. And so what we need to do as Democrats is to create that pressure and accountability from the left and say, hey, what you're doing is, hurting working families. Why do you keep cutting taxes for the rich people? And then you cancel the child tax credit that helps regular families. There needs to be somebody at that, local community candidate event. There needs to be somebody saying that in the community and putting that pressure on our leaders from the left, because if things get too extreme, I think most of your listeners would agree that it's not good. And that's also what it also does is it makes incumbents beholden to the donor class and afraid of, how the big money is going to attack them instead of really listening to their voters.
So let's talk about that for just a moment, because one of the frustrations that we have on the right is this issue of crossover voting. And I am seeing on left-leaning Facebook groups and others, there is a very proactive effort to recruit left-leaning people who probably vote Democrat in every November for forever. But they are trying to interfere in the Republican primary. Can I get you on record, Lauren, condemning this practice of Democrats registering as Republicans to fiddle with the primary elections in the Republican Party?
I'm the chair of the Idaho Democratic Party. I want people to register as Democrats, to serve as precinct captains in our party, to vote in our Democratic primary, where we have contested races, both statewide and in some local legislative districts. And so I want Democrats signing up as Democrats and voting in our primary.
Okay, so you would discourage Democrats. Maybe condemn is a strong word, but you would at least discourage Democrats from jumping into disingenuously registering as Republicans to extract the candidate they like better.
I want Democrats registered as Democrats. That's what's going to strengthen our party.
Okay. All right. Well, next one, you probably anticipated I was going to ask you about this. Tim Walz. Lauren, really? Tim Walz? You brought Tim Walz to Idaho. Do you really think that's going to help Democrats in a red state like Idaho to get energized and help them out?
We had a sold out crowd. We had more people on our waiting list than actually attended the event with Donald Trump Jr. So yes, people were very excited to hear from Governor Walz. He's been vilified because that's what happens in a presidential campaign, and he's done things in Minnesota that put working families first that would really benefit Idaho families. I just mentioned how the Idaho Republican supermajority canceled Idaho's measly child tax credit that was about $200. And you know what? You only got that full value of the $200 if your income tax bill was high enough. So you had to earn, and you had to be a high earner in order to get the full value of that. In Minnesota, Governor Walz ushered in a $1,750 tax credit a year per kid, because he's in the corners of, he wants to be in the corner of working families and help them at that, give families a boost at that hardest time financially. So I think he's misunderstood. I think if a lot of your listeners met him and heard his priorities, they would have a different view.
Are you concerned at all about the massive amount of fraud that is in Minnesota that has happened under his watch? I mean, politics aside, just that alone is concerning. Wouldn't you agree?
Fraud is a concern everywhere. It was a concern in Florida when U.S. Senator Rick Scott was leading a company that was found to have undertaken something like $200 billion in fraud against Medicare. And so we have to take that seriously everywhere. Governor Walz is working on strengthening that and strengthening those audits. And I mean, prosecutions have been happening for years around this. This isn't something new. But if you're gonna critique someone for fraud happening in their state by someone else, like let's look at the grift and the fraud that, Republicans themselves have done, like Rick Scott, who's now a U.S. Senator. He made a lot of money of that company that cheated Medicare, and then he used those funds to buy himself, a governor's seat and then the U.S. Senate. And so, Governor Walz did not commit any fraud, and he is working on correcting it and strengthening audits and prosecuting people who were the bad actors and who did the wrong thing. What we can't do is what we saw from the federal administration is say, okay, now all child care dollars are going to be withheld. You're going to punish everybody. You're going to punish kids and working families because one bad actor, or some group of businesses did something shady and wrong that needs to be corrected. Like the punishment has to go to the people who did the bad act.
Yeah.
That's who needs to be held accountable.
All right. Last question for you, Chairwoman Necochea. We have in East Idaho mostly Republican lawmakers. We do have a Democrat or two, but particularly in East Idaho, we have lawmakers that actually vote with the Democrats much more often than the average Republican lawmaker does in Idaho. People like Stephanie Mickelson and Ben Furman and Aaron Bingham and others. Are you grateful for their votes? Because they about 40% of the time, 35 to 40% of the time, they're voting with the Democrats in the legislature. Are you grateful that they align with you a pretty good portion of the time?
I'm grateful for the Democratic caucus that, and over the years I've seen it, kind of can keep the government running. There were years where the Medicaid budget only passed because of Democratic votes, Democrats voting with the Republicans who weren't going to defund Medicaid just on a given Tuesday because they wanted to throw a tantrum or score some political points for some index that was measuring how conservative they were. So I give credit to the Democratic caucus for, wise votes that are common sense and that I think align with most voters. Most voters don't want us to defund Medicaid. Even as the state gets more conservative, Medicaid expansion gets more popular, and something like 85% of voters in Idaho, want strong Medicaid, and they don't want to see Medicaid cut. So yeah, there are absolutely times when the common sense thing that pretty much anyone came up to on the street and said should be fund Medicaid or not, that there are Democrats are going to vote for that, and then there's a group of Republicans that are going to vote for it, and then there are the extremist Republicans who just vote no on everything, and just to make statements, not because I think if they had to actually be held accountable for their actions, they would behave differently.
All right. Our guest this morning, Lauren Necochea. She chairs the Idaho Democrat Party. Lauren, thank you so much for joining us. I appreciate it and would love to have you on another time.
All right. Sounds good. Thanks, Neal.
All right. It's 9:25 now on News Talk 107.9. We'll take a quick break and be back after this. All right, we're back 9:28 on News Talk 107.9. It's so funny to watch the text line during and after an interview like that. I had several people saying, way to go, way to hold her accountable, and other people are like, wow, Neal, zero pushback. You let that Dem walk all over you. So, potato, I guess. Anyway, I actually really appreciate her coming on. We obviously see things very, very differently, especially when it comes to things like Tim Walz and voucher versus tax credit and, a whole host of issues that we could go over and over and over again. And I will tell you my approach as host is I like to let people talk. And oftentimes, a non-answer is, and I'm not saying with Lauren Necochea, I actually thought she did a pretty good job of at least trying to answer the questions that I was asking her. But there are times when I've interviewed politicians, they will not answer my question. They deflect, they dodge, I'm not an attack dog. I'm not going to sit there and shame them and beat them over the head and require them to say yes or no. I'm like, their non-answer is their answer, and the listener is smart. The listener knows when the question has not been answered, and that doesn't mean I don't do a follow-up or try to get clarification. But I appreciate, I really appreciate it. They know, and look, she's not dumb. She's a smart lady, and she knows that she lives in Idaho, very red state. It's a state that went 2/3 for Trump a couple of times. And she knows that she has to find ways to appeal to conservatives to try and win over people to her point. She was more than generous with her time. I said, we're looking at about 15 minutes, and we went about 20. The other question I wanted to ask her is, and I think I know how she would answer, but I find the dynamic in the U.S. Senate race this year very interesting. Of course, Jim Risch is running again. He's very likely to win that because he is the incumbent and longtime incumbent. He's very organized. He wins elections quite handily. And just given the political makeup of Idaho, this is Jim Risch's race to lose. But the opponent is, I think, visibly taught Achilles. But there's also another opponent who, and I'm sorry, I know the name David Roth, who's running, who's the Democrat. But I would bet you most Democrats want Todd Achilles because I think they view his campaign as more viable and more visible, more organized, better funded, all of those things, because Todd Achilles was in the legislature. He has probably more name recognition. So I wanted to find out, and I think that was going to be the tell for me, was how she would answer that particular race. Was she going to give a full-throated endorsement of David Roth, given that now Todd Achilles, who is a Democrat, okay, he's a Democrat. He's running as an independent, but his whole campaign donation history, Democrat. His short tenure in the legislature, Democrat. He has supported he's supported Democrats. He has been a Democrat functionally for his political life. So I wanted to see how she was going to, but we were past on time. And that was another one that probably could have turned into one question that would last, 15 minutes all on its own. So anyway, we're going to take a break. And it's 9:32 on News Talk 107.9. And we'll come back after the news on this. We'll open up the phone lines, too, if you'd like to join us. 208-542-1079. 9:37 now on News Talk 107.9. If you'd like to join the program, 208-542-1079. You know what I look forward to? This is what I look forward to. All these Democrat legislative candidates putting Tim Walz on their mailers. Like, if he's based on the chair's description of Tim Walz, that's precisely what they probably ought to do. If his policies would be so good for Idaho, I really think they should put Tim Walz on their the mailers that they send, and their websites while they're at it. Maybe incorporate. I could, you know what I could do? I mean, I have all the facilities, the capability here on my radio show. If they want me to create their radio campaign commercials with Tim Walz clips included, I offer up my services. I'm here for you. Now, I have a feeling that may not happen, but don't ever accuse me of not offering, though. All right, 208-542-1079. And that, you know what? I love these conversations. They're a little bit tough at times. They can be a little cumbersome because I'm sitting there and I'm thinking, okay, the way that's getting characterized isn't quite accurate according to the way I see it. So that's different. Like there are these interruptible moments, but then it just turns into The View, where they are sitting there scrutinizing every last syllable and interrupting every last syllable. And it frustrates me to no end. It's like, why don't you let one side talk for a minute and then the other side can talk for a minute? Those are the conversations that I like. So anyway. Yeah, okay. Speaking of feuds, are you paying attention to what's happening with Tucker Carlson and Ted Cruz? So Ted Cruz recently spoke, and he is fed up with Tucker Carlson. And you know what? I think they obviously have genuine disagreements. I actually think there's something a little more personal going on. It was, I don't know, probably last year sometime. Ted Cruz went on to Tucker Carlson's podcast or show or whatever. And Tucker Carlson played this Bible knowledge gotcha game with Ted Cruz. And if there's one thing that Ted Cruz doesn't like, it's when somebody makes him look stupid. And I think that I think a score was set up, and it hasn't quite been settled yet. Listen.
The college classroom, I'm a lot less certain. And it is being spread by loud voices, the most consequential of whom is Tucker Carlson. I believe Tucker Carlson is the single most dangerous demagogue in this country.
Okay, that applause is very lukewarm. I think he's in a crowd that doesn't overwhelmingly agree with what he just said. But listen to the rest of what he said.
And I'll tell you, I've made the decision that I'm going to take him on head directly. If you look at the dissent of Tucker Carlson, and they're all the sort of lesser chattering voices that are moons circling his twisted planet. But if you look at the dissent, it started about a year and a half ago with platforming crackpot professors seeking to rewrite history about World War II. So he has one idiot whom he describes as the most consequential popular historian in the country, who leans forward and intones that Winston Churchill was the villain of World War II. He then finds another crackpot professor who says there's a good argument that America should have sided with the Nazis in Germany in World War II. And for all of this, Tucker gazes adoringly. By the way, no, there is not. Winston Churchill was an extraordinary historical figure. There's a reason Churchill's bust is on my mantle. If you come to my office, on the mantle there are 3 busts, one of Churchill, one of Reagan, and one of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. 3 extraordinary leaders who had vision.
Okay, so there's that. But after his Tucker Carlson comments, he shifted into taking on Nick Fuentes as well.
It then descends. Look, Nick Fuentes. It's actually interesting if you look at Republican politicians. Nick Fuentes is easy to denounce. And I actually think it's a tell among a Republican politician if they'll denounce Fuentes but are scared to say Tucker's name. That tells you a great deal. Nick Fuentes is a goose-stepping Nazi. And by the way, I'm not one who throws around the term Nazi loosely. But when Nick Fuentes says Hitler was very, very cool. I like Hitler and I agree with Hitler. Like, when you say you agree with Hitler, you are a Nazi. Tucker has Fuentes on his show. Doesn't question him about any of the ridiculous things he said. Doesn't react at all when Fuentes tells him his mission is to combat global Jewry. And Tucker nods, interesting. Fuentes tells him every year he celebrates Stalin's birthday. By the way, what kind of freak even knows Stalin's birthday? I don't know it, and I don't care to know it. But Tucker just coos when he says that.
Okay, so the table is set now. And Ted Cruz launched a volley to the other end, and now the ball is in Tucker Carlson's court. Now, I'm sure Nick Fuentes is going to weigh in on this too, which might be kind of interesting, but I think Nick Fuentes is taken much, much less seriously than Tucker Carlson is. But, you know, I look at Tucker and he left Fox News. We know that story, and he, you know, I think maybe he got a little too close to something and got ousted, and felt like he did a very good job of landing on his feet because his program was super sky-high popular. And so he launched the Tucker Carlson show on X, and it was around the time that Elon Musk was in charge, so it actually was a favorable environment for being able to express what's on your mind. And I think for a long time, most people listened to Tucker Carlson and probably agreed with him about 80% of the time. And I think most people will tolerate people that I love it when I go out and I meet someone who I've never met before, but they listen to the show religiously, and they're like, you know, I love your show. You're funny. You're insightful, whatever. And they're like, I don't agree with you all the time. And you might think that's a confrontational statement, but for me, it's not. For me, I like it. I don't want sycophantic listeners. I don't want listeners that are just like, oh, I love everything he says, because I want people to have the self-respect enough to disagree when they disagree. And that's okay. Like, I'm not threatened by that. It doesn't bother me if I have listeners that, now and then. Now, the thing that will get on my nerves are people that disagree with me 90% of the time, and then they spam our listener inbox via text with very, confrontational rhetoric. That gets old. But if it's like this respectful saying, you know what, I see it this way, that's fine. But back to Tucker for a moment. I think Tucker is making a weird swerve, and it looks oddly like the weird swerve that Candace Owens has taken, and I think it got her lots of temporary support for, I don't know how, maybe she's still doing Sky. I just don't see as much of her anymore. I don't hear much of the chatter that she's putting out there, because I think the whole lore around Charlie Kirk's murder and her conspiracy theories, I don't think the Brigitte Macron thing that she was doing, as weird as that might be, actually ended up benefiting her long term. And I think she's sort of marginalized herself. I worry that Tucker is doing the same thing. In an ecosystem where you survive by being different, you survive by cutting through the chatter. That's how you win on TikTok and Twitter and all the rest, is that you do something so unique that people are like, oh, that's different. I haven't heard that before. I haven't seen that before. I think I'm going to share that with my buddy. And then it goes viral, and then it's shareable. That's how you survive in a very, very busy social media landscape. And that's not me accusing Tucker Carlson of being disingenuous, because I don't think he's just doing it for the money. But I think you would find those things that make you stand out, and then you'd emphasize those things. But I feel like there's a great risk in doing that if you marginalize yourself with the base. And Tucker's base has been the people who tune into Fox News every night. But when they get fixated, and this is what's weird, this is what I don't fully understand. I don't agree with everything Benjamin Netanyahu does, or I certainly, think Israel could probably do some things maybe a little bit different. But on the whole, I absolutely have a great deal of compassion and sympathy for the daily danger that Israel has lived under for decades and decades. They have earned the right to operate with a different set of rules because I don't think it's quite as hostile now. I think they have cultivated relationships with their Arab neighbors and their Islamic neighbors that has made them a little more safe. But there's still plenty of people out there that would like to annihilate Israel. And there are certain issues where silence is almost tacit. Silence about anti-Semitism, I'll rephrase it, is anti-Semitic. Does that make sense? If you are apathetic towards it, then people rightly will look at that and say, why are you silent on this? Why do you seem so apathetic toward this egregious mindset that people have? Racism. Let's call it what it is. And that's what makes you wonder that, and again, see, I just got one in. Israel is the problem. Okay, well, you can say that, you can believe that. I think it is far more complicated than maybe any of us understand of what everything is that is at play. But it's sad because I have long been a Tucker fan, but I think that he is sacrificing his brand. I think he's sacrificing his reputation. I think that he's probably sacrificing what could be a very continued bright future for his media empire. And I think he's kind of gotten fixated the way Candace did. And I don't know if it's going to end up all that great for him. We'll take a break and be back after the. You should see my text line. Tucker's a has-been. Tucker's now all about the dollars. Both Tucker and Candace are consistently near the top of the podcast charts. True, but how long is that maintained? So I'm getting stuff all over the map. We'll be right back. We'll wrap it up after this. It's 9:56 on News Talk 107.9. This was a pretty funny moment on Laura Ingraham yesterday. This is Raymond Arroyo talking about former First Lady Jill Biden's book that's coming out. I don't want to play that for you real quick. Hold on.
Laura, look, following the path of Kamala Harris and Michelle Obama, Dr. Jill Biden is getting in on the act, dishing on her time as First Lady.
Serving in the historic East Wing was the honor of my life. View from the East Wing is an account of my time as First Lady. I share the good moments that lifted me and the difficult ones that challenged me. I also reflect on how this chapter in our lives came to a close, when Joe made the unprecedented decision not to seek re-election and pass the torch.
And burn the house down. There's no saving this narrative, Laura. And didn't the party decide that Joe Biden shouldn't seek re-election? I mean, that's the way I kind of remembered it. Very interesting.
How much do they have to pay people to buy that book in bulk, Raymond? Like what?
All right. So that when you heard the First Lady there, former, thankfully, say when Joe made the agonizing decision, that's not at all how it happened. They walked up to the old codger on the stage and gave him the shoveroo so they could do the switcheroo. That's what happened. In fact, now I'm having these little remembrances surface. The letter that Joe allegedly put out over that weekend, the signature on it of him basically saying, I've made the decision to withdraw, that oddly did not look like Joe Biden's signature. Do you all remember that? And I think it's still an unresolved question as to whether or not that actually was put out willfully by Joe Biden. It's amazing how they are willing to gaslight. All right, that's going to do it for the Neal Larson Show today. Thank you all for joining us. Julie's back tomorrow, and we'll see you on a Friday. Be safe.